See, so I'm not live, so I got to go there and figure it out. So we're gonna just make sure that we're live on this particular one, and it's locked. I know I'm not crazy when I say this.
Is it
All right,
YouTube?
we're public. Once I go public on the one, that it goes public on all of them. So I think we're set.
Yeah, something came up that said this is live across
Yep.
your screen. So
Yep. So we're all set. We're all set.
We're live.
Yep. Hey, this is Kareem. We're getting ready to get started really quickly. We're just doing a couple touch-ups and just a couple of checks to make sure that we are all set. So we're going to get started here with United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. So today, technically, we'll be talking about the wealth gap. Thank you for those of you who are coming in. Congratulations, Rebecca, for being the number one in the stream. And, of course, Geraldine Bowen Walker, we certainly appreciate you continually coming in week after week. We want you guys to like, tag, and share this conversation. But we're also going to begin talking about, hey, what's going on, Donna? Talking about what's happening with all this gun violence. I think it's worth a conversation. We need to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it just a little bit today. So we want you guys to get involved with this conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, be sure that you share them with us, and we would love to hear what you have to say. All right, so we're going to get going. Take it away, John.
Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I am in the studio with my man, John B. He's producing for us now. He's off training wheels. He's making this thing happen by himself. John, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
Good. We should probably get used to each other. Today Mark is off doing great things, making big business moves and all that good stuff. Normally he's flying the friendly skies, but he is with us today. He's at home in his home studio. Mark, what's going on with you?
Pleasure to be here, Kareem. Thanks for letting me do this from home. I had some business calls up until right about now, so thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here tonight.
Actually, I'm enjoying because I have not seen this, and I'm looking at the pop art and I'm looking at the different things you got going on in the background. I know that you are a man who loves art, unique things. We were just talking about someone that you have in common, you and your designer. I don't know if you want to let your...
Sure, Kyun Young, great guy. He lives in Saginaw, has been a lifelong resident. Used to teach at SVSU, I think, interior designer. He was here this afternoon helping me with hanging some new artwork that I have. It's not in this room, it's in a different room, but helping me order a new dining room table and chairs as well. So
yeah, no, he does a phenomenal job. I know Kuhn has worked with my mom, who's in the stream right now, and so you guys kind of have all that design stuff going on.
Yeah.
So no,
we need to work on you a little bit, Kareem. I'd like to take you clothes shopping.
Never. Mark, I'm gonna tell you, I am cool. Right now, I got on my Ralph Lauren plaid. I'm a man who does. I can dress it up when I need to, but I really kind of like just jeans and t-shirt. I do a little bit extra when I have to, but other than that, I leave all of the colors and the prints and the style to you, Mark. And I'll just stay in your shadows when it's time for us to do that. Okay. But for those of you who are tuning in, thank you, Jenny DeMore. Great to see you as well. We're going to get the show started, and we're going to really get into this conversation. I want to thank everyone who continually listens here at WSGW 790 and 100.5 FM. Wow. So we're going to get into this conversation. There is a lot to talk about. A lot has happened over the past 10 days, and the past 24 hours has just been absolutely horrific. Our thoughts and our prayers and our hearts go out to all of those individuals in Uvalde, I think it is, Texas, with this, what I consider, which is probably one of the worst massacres we've had. This is 21 individuals dead. I don't know if that includes his the shooter's grandmother, but we're going to talk about that just a little bit today. For those of you who are tuning in, another massacre just 9 days after the massacre that took place in Buffalo, New York. Different situations, different turns, but the same outcome. A number of people are dead, a few wounded. 18-year-old shooter Salvador Ramos opens fire at Robb Elementary School. It's an elementary school. Like, we have gotten to a place that now we are having mass shootings at elementary school. You know, I was looking at something, guys, and when we were looking at the students who were a part of Columbine, they're now about 40 years old or so. They should be in their 40s. And here we are, a whole nother cycle with elementary kid students.
Yeah, Sandy Hook in Connecticut, which was very similar to this. I think it was more 20 some odd elementary school students, teachers.
Yeah, so this is not going away. I hate to say it, I would hate to think that this is our new normal, but something's gotta change. The crazy thing that I'm looking at is these details are coming in, and I think I listened to every news outlet on the planet today, just trying to just kind of see how things were going. And I'm also interested in how media is going to spin this and how politics is injected in these situations. But his day started off by shooting his grandmother. How are you going to how are you going to start your day off, by killing Gigi? You kill Gigi, and then I guess everybody else can get it at that point. I mean, if you're going to kill your grandmother, nobody is off limits. Everybody's a target. And it wasn't sure if initially that, he had just kind of gotten into an accident because I guess he had run off the road and they thought maybe the school was just kind of the target just because of proximity. But it looks like he's, from his social media posts, hey, I'm going to kill my grandmother. He kills her. Hey, I'm going to shoot up an elementary school, and he begins to shoot that school up. So this was not an accident. This was something that was intentional. Broke into the school, barricaded himself in one room, then moved to another room. And I was just in my mind, I always picture, this shooter going through the hall and just shooting like we've seen some of these others, but he barricaded himself in a room with a class and really just began to execute those students that were in that class along with the teachers. It is hard for me to fathom and how someone can do this. Mark, what are your thoughts? I mean, I'm at a loss for words in this, and that doesn't happen very often.
Frankly, on any of them, Kareem, I'm at a loss for words. I mean, how does someone go doing it? And ultimately, you have to be in a really bad, sick place. Different things drive it to kind of go do that. I mean, I'm at a loss for words. I know people think there's simple answers. I don't think there's simple answers. I know people are tired of hearing condolences and prayers, and people want action. I understand that, and we do need to do something. I just don't think the answer is as simple as some people may think it is. So,
I don't know, John. What are you thinking? I mean, you're a young guy. What do you think when you hear this type of thing? What comes to mind?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is I've worked at a school. My mom is a teacher.
Exactly.
I've worked at a school with kids like this for 5 years now. And all that I can think of is picturing the kids that I work with on a daily basis in the after school care program and stuff. And it's a terrible thought. And it's one of those, okay, my brain immediately goes to what steps can I take personally to make sure this doesn't happen in my proximity. And we've talked through it as a staff and all that, but it's a tough thing to think about. And it's certainly on a bigger scale. This was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. It was obviously someone who had major problems, and there were red flags left and right, and none of them got caught, it seems like, until it was too late. And
what are the red flags? Because that was one of the things, they were saying that this guy had no history of any type of mental illness, but his friends seem to think, oh, this dude is crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. When his friends are saying, man, this guy's kind of losing it. And there were reports of self-harm. There were reports of increasing levels of violence. It wasn't just a sudden outburst that he killed his grandmother and then a bunch of kids and some adults in a school.
It was like the Oxford case, or again, a lot of times, I mean, people see it coming. I don't know that anyone ever thinks that they're going to do this ultimately, but people see an ever increasing, like, okay, there's a problem here. And I don't know that anyone sees like, okay, now he's going to go kill 20 people at an elementary school, but almost always there's red flags. Almost always.
And Jenny DeMore asked, how did he get into school? You can't get in my school without a buzzer, and asking, what are you here for? And if I'm not mistaken,
he got in through an open door.
Yeah, he got in through an open door, and then he was smashing windows to get from one place to the next place, I guess.
Yep.
And then he eventually barricaded himself in a room. Now, I want to.
The reality is you can lock all the doors, but if you have windows, one gunshot to a window and you're through a window, unless you're going to put bulletproof windows everywhere. So,
Mark, I tell people that all the time. If someone wants to really get in your home, they're going to get in your home. Yeah. So the best thing to do is just have a plan in case that happens. But I want to listen. We're going to put on Steve Kerr, who is now he's a coach. Which team is he coaching now? Is he coaching Dallas? I think he's coaching the Mavericks.
He has to have been in Texas because they were playing. He was not far away from.
Yeah. And they're not far from, because this town was actually on the border, correct, Mark? Okay. And so when I think of Steve Kerr, I think of the time that we spent together when he was coaching in Phoenix for the Phoenix Suns, and then again when he was coaching up for the Golden State Warriors. Always been a real solid dude, likable guy, a passionate guy, and just really one of those. He's a dad, he's a husband. And that's kind of what he purports to his team as players. That's why they have such great connection. I want to play what Steve says, and what he says to me is very passionate. And it is something that I was kind of stirred by hearing someone out of, the left field, so to speak, not the usual suspect that's speaking, give his passionate plea for something to change. We've heard, politicians do it, but there's something different when a businessman who's in the community, who has kids, and he's making this impassioned plea. We're going to listen to what Steve says, and then we're going to come back and have a little bit of conversation about what Steve says.
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly Black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California. And now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check. 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
Wow. That was intense. There's a lot, Mark, and it's funny. I'm sitting here thinking like I've spent my life in basketball. Steve is still the coach of the Warriors. And I just laughed about it because over COVID, I kind of like boycotted sports and I wasn't like watching any sports. And so for some reason, I'm like going, where does he? It was the Dubs and the Warriors. We were watching the game last night. It's so funny. But his statement was just, to me, you could hear and sense the pain in his tone. And he said something. The reason why I wanted to bring in that conversation is because he said a few things in there that I think I would really like to examine and get your thoughts on. He said that the reason why we won't vote on this gun legislation that's out there is because individuals want to hold on to power. What did you think that it was that he was talking about when he was making that statement? I wish he would have given someone a chance to ask. But what do you think?
I'm assuming, and I didn't go back and look. I saw this earlier today. I didn't go look at the legislation. I didn't look at the senators that are holding it up. I'm assuming it's the Republican senators. And I guess, again, reading into what he said, I'm assuming he's saying that the Republican senators are worried that if they were to support that, they would lose their base and potentially lose the election. And ultimately, this is kind of where I agree with them. That we're in kind of the state of politics. It's so divisive, and it's so you've got to feed the core base of your party. That's been the frustrating thing for me. Of like, I see people making decisions or doing things, it would, to at least me, appear to be for the basis of getting reelected versus doing what they think is necessarily the right thing to do. I think that's why people are just so frustrated and disillusioned with the state of politics in this country. And I've gotten involved in my previous role, never was really involved before that. And the amount of time that a lot of these politicians and money spend on an effort to get reelected versus doing something is really quite amazing.
I take your point. I think point taken. John, did you have anything different or any other inflection points that you'd like to add?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. It's tough because you're not going to make everybody happy, but it is about making sure that everybody is safe. But I think that different people have different ideas about what is safe.
What is safe? That's a good question.
Yeah.
What is safe?
Exactly.
What are your thoughts? What is safe to you, John? When you think about safe, and we're having this conversation, which ultimately becomes a conversation about what are we willing to do as it relates to putting some limits on the NRA. That honestly, there's no other way to shake this thing. What is safe? What does safe mean to you?
Personally, just my personal opinion, I think that I can only affect what is around me. I can only affect the immediate circumstances that I am in. I'd rather be able to affect those, be able to ensure that they are safe. I'd rather not have some nebulous outside something going, oh, you're safe, like a gun-free zone. Almost all mass shootings take place in gun-free zones. And I don't think gun-free zones are safe. Now, do I want literally every single person around me carrying it to be required to carry a firearm? No.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much what you're doing in Texas. That's pretty much how things go. Like,
I couldn't believe it. Like in this state, I was at an antique fair one time and I saw a dude walking around with a pistol on his belt. I'm like, what the hell?
You still get a bit of a shock.
I didn't realize it. An open carry, you can walk around as long as it's open with a gun.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is now. I've never looked at this issue. I mean, I'm diverging a little bit from your question of like what is safe. I think that's a very individual question. I think you'll never be in a case where you've got infinite safety because these things happen everywhere. They clearly happen here more than any place else, probably, or close to it. But crazy people do things in a lot of other countries too. But one of the things that I found interesting, again, I spent a few hours this afternoon just kind of looking around at different studies, and everyone thinks, okay, we need gun control laws. And what's been interesting is, and the big thing is always around, assault weapons and things like that. But I saw 2 or 3 studies where they've said that actually the most effective laws were not about outlining particular types of weapons. It's the laws that Steve Kerr was talking about, which is doing kind of extensive background tests, psychological tests, and those actually tend to be way more effective at curbing gun violence than just restricting certain types of guns.
Okay,
and
so
to your point of like New York has got one of the most restrictive gun laws, of any country in this, any state in the country, and we just had some dude gun down a bunch of people in New York, and so I don't know that there's an easy answer here, but Steve Kerr's right. We've got to do something. You can't just keep doing nothing.
Okay, my thing is this, and I tell you all the time, I talk about my guns. I enjoy shooting guns. I say this all the time, but my thing is this: if it's an assault rifle, what does an assault rifle have? Why is an assault rifle in the streets? Why is it on? You can't drink till you're 21 in Texas, but you can go out and buy 2 assault rifles when you turn 18.
It's the reason. Why do people want them? It's I have friends that have them because they like to go out to the gun range and shoot them. They think they're a blast to shoot.
Mark, I'm going to tell you this. I was down, and I told you I was in Arizona and shooting hand cannons. They were fun to shoot, but when I left the hand cannon at the gun store because I could rent it and shoot any gun. We're shooting bazookas, all kinds of stuff. Arizona, you can shoot anything you want to, kind of like Texas. But I left it there because there is no real reason why I think a civilian should ever have a military grade weapon, period. That's why they're military grade weapons. Yep. The only reason I see this happening, and when I think about what Steve Kerr was talking about when he talked about power, and I think that people have a right to bear arms, and we're going to have a conversation. I was speaking with a law professor about what the Second Amendment meant and how it meant something different at a particular time. That's a whole nother conversation. Yep. But when I think about this and I see this, when he says that they want to hold on to power, I'll tell you, there's a reason why people have guns. There's a reason why when this COVID thing hit in 2020, people were under the fear that there might be martial law. And what happened? White America was clearing out those those assault rifles. I'm Mark. It sounds very. I think it's hard to understand for someone like us who are very. I think that when you're academic to some degree, and you're learned and you're kind of educated to some level or some understanding, but there is a very base level, and I always think that when people are fearful, we retreat to our very lowest common denominator of who we are. And what we saw were shotgun shells going off the rails, assault rifles, just crazy. You couldn't find them.
I think, I don't remember exactly. A lot of times when they're afraid they're going to get outlawed, there's a run on things.
Exactly. And so when I think about power, I think that here in America, when we talk about power, we're talking about ammunition power.
I don't think that's what Steve Kerr was talking about.
That's not what Steve was talking about. But I had this conversation with some other individuals that were just kind of talking like when we talk about power in the United States, we're not always talking about political power. We're talking about power, really real power. What we saw on January 6th, if we don't get what we want, we're going to take it. There is that sense. And I think there is a large, vast contingency of people who feel that way. Now, this is the thing that gets me. The NRA controls our government, and anybody who says anything different, I beg to differ. As much as I love my Second Amendment right, as much as I love to shoot, I'm willing to ban anything that has been used over and over again in killing folks. Steve went from old elderly Black people to churchgoers to now kids, teenagers, high school. Oh, that's an old thing. It's been done. Now we're killing elementary kids. And I just think that it's time for us to do something different. I know that all of our listeners will listen. Is what I've learned, Mark, is that there's a lot of people who listen to our conversations on the radio on Sunday, but they'll never jump into this stream. They're like, we're never going to get in the stream, but we have conversations about what we're talking about. And I think that this is very important. I'm going to do just because I want to talk about what happened today when the governor and all of the people, the legislators and Marco Rubio and all of them were in Texas and they were talking. But I think that we want to take a pause. I do want to take a pause. Like I said, my heart goes out to those individuals who are in Texas, those families that are affected, the entire state. I feel like the state or that entire community has been under siege. How do you recover from this type of traumatic experience? Devontae Marcellus, law enforcement needs the resources to address the issue of illicit illegal weapons trade. The federal government needs to implement those common sense restrictions, background checks, etc. So if you want to keep your assault rifles, let's add on the number of days that you have to wait in order to get those, weapons. And so I think that's fair. And I think that nobody wants people walking around with military grade rifles who should not have those things. And really kids without supervision should never have those weapons. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back to the second half. We're going to talk about the wealth gap, which is what we really were going to talk about when we come back with more United Shades of Gray. Hey, those of you who are watching out via social media, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate your comments. Devontae Marcellus, great comment. You're absolutely right. Jenny DeMore, those of you who are here, let's like, tag, and share this conversation with other individuals. Your conversation makes our conversation more colorful. So we want to thank you guys. And for those of you who are going to be listening to this, we are certainly glad to have you guys as a part of this conversation. We'll be right back and get going in just a couple seconds here.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem Bowen. We're back from commercial break. This is United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. And I am in the studio with my guy, Jonathan B. in the place to be. What's up, John?
Hey, good conversation so far.
Great conversation so far. We have also out there somewhere in StreamYard land, Mark Bassett. He is in with us today. Mark, what's going on?
Just enjoying the show as always.
All right. So Mark, as you see, I told you guys we were going to bring in so that you guys could see my guy, John. Mark decided to go from home. John is in the studio. So you see all of us here. John and I are in the studio holding it down until Mark gets done making bazillion-dollar deals. Okay. So I want to get back to where we are. We're just going to clear up a couple of things there was this conversation. And this is what we always say that we hate, Mark. I was watching, I think the governor, lieutenant governor, U.S. senator, all of the officials for Texas, which are pretty much all Republicans. I think there's one Democratic seat there or something like that. One or two seats that are Democratic or something of that nature. But anyways, so in the time when they're talking, what's the guy's name?
Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke. Against them.
Beto O'Rourke. I was watching. Beto O'Rourke comes in. You don't hear anything he says, but the stage, I mean, I'm assuming we know who Beto is. We know what Beto represents. I'm sure we know, kind of what he probably said. And the stage went ridiculous. One guy went crazy, like, what are you doing? I mean, he just I'm like, you are in a public forum, right? Like, let's hold this together. But those are the things that we don't like. But I want to ask this question. When I looked at what was being reported, the Republican Party has a way of always going back to making everything about, they never want to say it's about the gun issues. What's that, Mark?
Mental health.
Yes,
Which is
always
true.
mental health.
Yep.
And I don't always understand that, because that can't be the only reason why we have these issues. This kid has no future, no previous mental
I
health.
think
And
it's back to Steve Kerr's comment. You know, they want to. Again, it's not a simple issue. It's not just gun control, gun laws. It's a lot of things. Mental health being one of them. And I believe that they don't want to touch that because they know a good chunk of their voting base doesn't like them to touch that. So
mess with those guns, leave the guns alone. So politics for play, and the amount of money that's there. But we have to ask ourselves, who is behind? Like, when we say the NRA, who's behind the NRA? Who are the individuals that make up that huge, powerful, scary beast, that lobbying group? And I would say,
which has been dealt with a lot of scandal in the last few years, actually. So,
and I don't understand it. But Mark, anyways, my final thought here is, what must other countries think of us? We're supposed to be the most civilized, democratic country in the world, and yet we have more incidents of gun violence and mass gun shootings and things of this nature, and yet we do absolutely nothing. So there's been a request from the Republican leadership to, hey, give us some space. How can you make this about it's about the grieving parents. If it's about the grieving parents, let's do something so no one else has to grieve.
Right.
But what do you think is going to come out of this? Do you think there's going to be any meaningful change? I don't think anything has happened in Sandy Hook.
I have a hard time believing there will be. Nothing has happened yet. And if anything, we're more divided and divisive politically than we've been before. So, I mean, because to make something happen, people have to reach across the aisle and try to find a common ground. And that just doesn't seem to happen a lot now. Who knows? I mean, maybe
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
It'll be interesting, Mark, because I'll tell you the other thing that went through my head, and I hate that I thought this, but I'm gonna be very honest. I'm gonna put it out there. This was a town that is almost at the border. Mm-hmm. We understand our issues with individuals who cross our border. We understand how border towns feel about, Mexican populations and the increasing Mexican. All of the victims in this particular situation, including the perpetrator, were all Hispanic. So I'm wondering, is that going to play any role in how little or how much gets done to really change the narrative on this particular situation? It'll be interesting. Yep. I'm hoping that at some point America shows that we have a desire to really protect our own and take care of those things which are most vulnerable, which are the little bit of babies. So our hearts and prayers go out to Buffalo, which has not finished burying their last victims, and now on to Uvalde, Texas, where this is just really a horrendous situation. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. Just a quick note, Juneteenth we'll be celebrating here in the city of Saginaw. There's going to be all over the country, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit. It is something that is going to be taking place everywhere. There will be celebrations. There will be a parade, a pageant, and other things coming up. When we get to June, we'll talk more about that and the celebrations that will be taking place, because some really cool things are happening around the world. Those who are listening, what is Juneteenth? It is June 19th. It is the celebration of the freedom of Blacks officially from slavery here in the U.S. All right, so we're going to change our direction really quick. And Mark, you sent me over a link, and we've had some conversation. And Mark, I'm not sure where you went. John doesn't like seeing you in the stream, I guess, so he kicks you out.
I can see. I'm here. Aren't I here?
Yeah, you're here now. Okay. You weren't here 2.5 seconds ago. Okay. But we often have said, and we've often had conversations, and your thing has been that you feel the greatest thing, or I shouldn't say the greatest, one of the biggest issues that does not get talked about, that you really think we needed to really work on, is this concept or the idea of, or the real thing of this growing wealth gap, this huge growth in the wealth gap. Mark, why don't you, I'll allow you to share. Why do you think, why is this such an important issue? And why is it such an important issue to you?
Well, those are two different questions. I mean, when people are doing well financially or improving financially, I think it tends to solve a lot of their issues. And so I think, when you're really poor and you're trying to figure out where you're going to get food for the table, you do things that you might not normally do if you have a good paying job and you're making good money, and maybe you're not rich, but you can send your kids to school and you can put food on the table. And ultimately, that's how this country was built, is creating wealth. That's kind of the capitalism. And so I think it kind of solves a lot of the ills of society when people are improving financially. Why is it important to me? Again, I think people want to have opportunities. And when they feel like they have an opportunity to do better, again, it allows them to do better. I just hate seeing people who are talented stuck in a position where they don't feel like they have an opportunity to better themselves and have a better life for themselves and their family. I've never thought about the second question, to be honest. So.
I think it's super noble. And honestly, out the gate, this is one of the things that I was talking about social justice and all of this other stuff. You're like, Kareem, we really need to have a conversation about the wealth gap. And, when we look at the past 40 years here, there's been a huge, radical increase in the gap of the wealth gap in America. And so I would like to have a little bit of conversation about what is the cause, what can be done, and how will we begin to remedy this particular situation. I think it's so very important. Roderick McCullough said that in capitalism, someone has to be exploited. Now, Rod,
that is that to be true. So,
well, I don't think that it has to be true, but I think that poverty is built into the bear of capitalism. I think that poverty is an essential piece. And if you read books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, they that's basically what they're saying. There's two types of people in this world. And, there's these people and there's these people. But I think that when we look at capitalism, especially when we look at capitalism that's unchecked, that goes unchecked,
for sure,
it has built into it.
I mean, you need, like anything, you need checks and absolute power kind of corrupts absolutely. And so there needs to be checks and balances for sure. And so like in early industrial age, for sure, I think, the worker was exploited, and that's why, unions came to be. And, I would argue today, I'm sure there will be a lot of people on this call that disagree. I think unions have largely outlived their usefulness for the most part, but
why would you say that, Mark? I'm going to tell you, coming from someone who I was born and bred. My grandfather came to the North from Maringouin, Louisiana. Know this town, Maringouin, where his family were not sharecroppers, but slaves picking sugarcane and cotton. During this industrial revolution and moving forward, he came.
To me, that's a different time and place. I mean, so you had all sorts of, an imbalance of power in a certain sense, and so these industrial
and that imbalance of power has changed, Mark.
Well, I think it started to close, and I think and there's all sorts of laws now and everything that kind of balances the power a bit. Now, the interesting thing I've read is the wealth gap has opened up again, actually back to, if not worse than the early industrial era, really driven by technology. So these technology barons, Steve Jobs, Bezos, and the list, Elon Musk, so the wealth gap, back in the early industrial age, you had these handfuls of industrial giants that controlled it. All the power was consolidated into a few people. It's kind of gone back to that a bit. We've gotten off track a little bit. I think, so like if you ask me if I were a worker, would I want to be in a union? Absolutely not. And the reason is, and again, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that totally will disagree with me, but I think unions drive towards mediocrity. So they protect the poor performer and they don't reward the exceptional performer.
Okay. Well, okay. So, and I think that is appropriate and consistent with your positioning in terms of, where you come from out of the business world, Mark.
Yep.
But let me say this, as a young Black man who grew up in a community, General Motors family, grandfather General Motors, he left General Motors. I think majority of my aunts and uncle at one point, my mom, my dad are both General Motors. That's what put me through school. And you talked about how, because there was a period of time right in the 70s where, right about where there was a closing of this wealth gap. And the thing that I thought that played a great played a significant role in that was the fact that unions existed and had some power and capacity.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think at one point they had a purpose. My only thing is I'm not sure that they still have the same purpose that they did. And sometimes
I think that they do, and this is why. Because what it made sure of is that right now, one of the issues that we're having is that currently inflation is growing at a rate that people's wages are not. Unions were responsible for making sure, and the UAW, when I worked with the state of Michigan, I think it was the UAW, they were making sure that we had cost of living increases that were consistent, that would neutralize the level of inflation that existed. This is a season in which I think that having some unions and people that were able to stand up for those individuals who are underrepresented or marginalized would be very, very important. So the moment that we got to Reaganomics, Ronald Reagan and his Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, is where we began to see an explosion between the wealth gap.
That's not what the data shows. I mean, the wealth gap
back in the mid-'80s is when we began to see the wealth gap over the past 40 years really begin to increase. Yeah. And I agree with you to the point that now it is the tech force that is now creating this huge divide.
Yeah.
And it's go ahead.
Yeah, and the original question is why do you think it happened? I think if you look at from after World, so when did the U.S. economy explode? It was obviously after World War II through the early, through the 60s, and when when the rest of the world's economies are destroyed and you own the vast majority of the GDP, but what drove the expansion of the middle class was manufacturing in the U.S.
Absolutely.
And the company I just came from, Hemlock Semiconductor, I don't know, 1,200 jobs. And if you look at the definitions of middle class, upper income and lower income, almost all of those jobs, sit in the middle income bracket. There are a few at really low entry level jobs that probably are on the precipice in between the two, maybe. I don't have the data in front of me. And then the people at the top are clearly in upper income. But I think manufacturing, skilled trades, factories like the ones you just spoke about, were huge middle class engines because Hemlock, you can be an hourly worker, an operator, and make really good money. And you've got a great question here. The globalizations of economies and the U.S. consumer demanding cheaper and cheaper stuff, frankly, help make this thing happen, what she's talking about, which is why did all of that manufacturing go overseas? It's because it could be made cheaper overseas, frankly, because, the workers in the U.S. were middle class versus in poverty in China. And the U.S. consumer didn't want to pay for, a car made by U.S. citizens. It's too expensive.
There you go. And I think that it was really to make sure that we continue. This is where this is the beast of capitalism.
Yes.
Okay, Mark.
And there's no perfect system.
However, the one that the upper echelon of America often buys for is capitalism. And I believe in capitalism, but I think that capitalism has to have checks and balances because
100% agree.
What we see happening is, go ahead, John. I'm going to let you make your point because I'm not going to forget mine.
So I think we're going to go along. We're going to think similarly on this. I think we need to make a distinction between capitalism, free market, competition. Two businesses of equal size can get their business affected by a third business, whereas corporatism is huge conglomerates, often subsidized and supported by the government. They hold each other up as a crutch. I think that it is important to make that distinction because I'm of the opinion that America is corporatist at this point. I think it was capitalist at a point. I think we've moved towards corporatism.
Okay, and so how do you say that if that were the case and it was corporatism, I don't think that we would see such an increase, a dramatic increase in the wealth gap in the manner that we currently see it.
I think the opposite.
Okay,
I think if a business has a corner on a market, think Google who has
Amazon,
more power than the Roman Empire ever did.
Absolutely.
Think about that.
Absolutely.
They can do whatever they want to their employees. Amazon, they hold basically almost a monopoly on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, John, is to me, it's back to the analogous of these big industrial barons, the oil company,
Absolutely.
Rockefeller Oil, and they've gotten like Amazon and Facebook, and they've just gotten so big, and so what do you do about it? I mean, the last time we had this situation, they broke them
You're
up.
having antitrust acts.
Yeah, you broke them up and said, just to your point, Jonathan, these are monopolies, and so
so in that perspective, I would agree with you, John.
yeah.
But I want us to take a look at when we look at where we are and how we've allowed ourselves to kind of play into this space, and we're talking about why it's happening. So I'll tell you why it's happening, Mark. And this is one of the things that I think is really interesting, is because when we began to see the deterioration of things such as unions and things of that nature, we also began to see this concept of 1980s. If we give these corporations and these upper 1%ers these breaks, that they're going to see a need for the great American dream and to spread the wealth, and it's going to trickle down and we're all going to become better. But instead of reinvesting that wealth into systems, we bought yachts and we bought summer homes. And
well, those are those guys. That's a different
and
thing.
hold on,
personal wealth versus corporate wealth.
No, that's personal wealth, absolutely. But corporate wealth leads to personal wealth when you're at the top of these companies.
Well, that's the other thing that
eventually happened was when it became an issue of them having to continue to have sustainable, real, meaningful wages. The option then came, no, Americans don't want to pay that much for. It wasn't that we didn't want to pay that much, but it now messes with our bottom lines with companies. So it's easier for us to go over and exploit another country. And we say that we're American companies, but half of what we produce, 90% of that goods, is being produced by someone else with someone else in mind. And then we bring it back and we tell people to buy American, when really it's not American that we're buying. It is a foreign product that is as I think it was Rob saying, it's not an American company. It's a foreign company that is operating in America as an American company. And so I think when we talk about unions, that is where I think capitalism does not desire to see unions take place, because it makes America and America's corporations responsible, not only in terms of how they treat those people, but it also lobbies that corporations are responsible for paying their fair share of tax. And I think that it makes sense. There is a tipping point in which corporations can say, look, it's easier for me to take these jobs somewhere else than come back here. And I said, if you're going to take your job somewhere else, then take your product somewhere else. And we'll deal with people who understand that Americans deserve a livable wage. What were you going to say, John?
Well, the concept of too big to fail is one that I don't personally believe should have ever existed, of the government going, oh, well, the government bailouts. I think if a company's going to, and that's corporatism versus capitalism. I think if a company's going to fail, let it fail. And it hurts. It hurts when a big company crumbles. But all in all, that's how we get to this point. That's the trickle down economics, propping it up. No, you can't fail. So you can treat your people however you want. You can spend however you want. And
I hear what you guys. Number one, I agree with Jonathan. When you got,
I agree, John.
Too big. I mean, coming from a different perspective of having run large businesses.
Let it fail. No.
Except those employees, the 150,000 employees at that company don't like that answer. But because it's easy to say, well, let the CEO, get out of a job, but 99.9% of those employees are middle class people that just lost their job, like Enron.
But what happens though, Mark? Capitalism would say that as that company fails, that there would be another company that would come along and that would be able to fill that gap and fill that.
I understand. It's just it's not as simple as just people want to say let it fail. There are people that are a lot of average people impacted when a giant bank or a giant car
or General Motors closes in a community, right?
Yeah. I think the global. I know people want to make it again easy and just say like, okay, it's greedy guys at the top wanting to keep all the money for themselves. But the reality is the economy's globalized. There's also external forces that you're competing with that are playing by different rules. And so, car companies in other parts of the world are dealing with different things than car companies that produce cars here. And so I don't think it's as simple as it's just some greedy dudes at the top pocketing all the money. And,
well, I think that's one of the reasons. And Mark, you just happen to be one of those greedy dudes we're talking about today.
But unfortunately, I wish I got paid when those dudes got paid. I didn't get paid anywhere near. I mean, one of the things that people have talked about, though, kind of is, again, it's aligned with the article, which is like the class of people that grew the most was actually upper income. So actually over 50%, well, I don't have the numbers in front of me. You may have it.
Yep.
But it used to be over 50% of the population was middle income. Now it's like 40.
Yeah.
And it's almost 50% or slightly over 50 is upper income, actually.
Yeah. Well, we got to close out, but one thing that I want to say, and it's crazy how fast this time goes.
It does.
Even cover it. It's time to go. We got to talk to the powers that be. Let it fail. But anyways, when we think about this, I also want to come back and we have this conversation. We're going to add some other things into this conversation about the wealth gap. One of those things is this idea, quote unquote, affordable housing. I think is a key piece that also contributes to the wealth gap. And then this concept of gentrification, where we are taking neighborhoods and we're building condos. So homeowners are benefiting. But if you're a renter in that community, you now may find yourself homeless, which adds to those lower population numbers. And I think there's a lot of that we have to add and have a conversation about. I think some other people who probably are a little bit smarter than us would do very well to be a part of this conversation.
I don't know. I think we're pretty smart, Kareem. We may not know a lot, but we're pretty smart.
Well, we certainly thank you guys for tuning in. A number of you said, hey, I just stumbled on this Roddick McCullough. You definitely are a free thinker. Come on through. Check us out again. Devontae Marcellus. Those of you who are here, like, tag, and share this conversation. This is United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. This show will air on Sunday at 7 p.m. You can listen to it in its entirety. Thank each and every one of you for listening in. We thank you all. God bless you. Grace and peace. So we want to thank those of you who are listening to us and following along with this conversation. If you've liked this conversation, this is what we endeavor to do. Mark and I have a great relationship. We've been able to spark a very good friendship. But the tension in terms of where we come from and often in our beliefs is very real. We've learned to, in this process, to be honest about our thoughts and feelings, which we wish more of America could really do. But be authentic in terms of how we feel. And in doing so, have these wonderful conversations where we can begin to really look at each other and examine what can we do to begin to move the needle, because nothing changes unless we have a conversation. Mark, anything you'd like to say to those that are listening in our social media?
No, yeah, just join in. And I'm glad people are listening, and we appreciate any feedback you think we can help make the show better. Love to hear it.
Yeah, so give us a shout out. My producer, John, you're coming in and you got to jump in and fill these big shoes that were set before you. You're doing an amazing job. Anything you'd like to say to
Thank you. No, I thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope that I can uphold the legacy that was put before me.
I think he's hit the ground running, Kareem. I think did a great job
Man,
tonight.
come on, wait a minute. You're taking it to another level already. I appreciate you being here. And your commentary and your input, it definitely was. I was about to jump on you, but I listened to what you said. This is what is so important. I was getting ready to but I stopped and I listened to you. And as I listened to you, I was like, wait a minute, I'm agreeing with what he's saying right here.
I was in the same spot. You were in the same thing. I think we're on the same wavelength
But
here.
this is what happens. Many times we have opinions that we just assume are going to be different, or we come up with our thoughts that we want to throw out there. But when we engage in this kind of conversation, we recognize that there are some similarities in terms of, the things that we feel. How do we begin to change this from a conversation to actually beginning to create policy and conversations around policies that need to change? I think it starts here. I thank you guys for your time and your attention on this evening. Mark, I know you got many, some more meetings to take care of and big things happening over there. So we're going to let you go. And those who are in our social media stream, listen to us again next week, same time, same bat channel. God bless you all.